Hello everybody, Vic here with another video, and today I'm posing the question, is Dream Master the most underrated sequel in all of horror films? And that's a big, bold title, of course. All of horror might be a little bit over the top here, but in terms of the big horror slasher franchises, Friday the 13th, Halloween, Elm Street, Child's Play, I think amongst those franchises at least, I think Dream Master is one of the more underrated sequels. It's going to sound vaguely familiar to people that watch my Halloween videos. I always champion Halloween 4 as my favorite sequel in the franchise and the most underrated sequel in the franchise. And I kind of feel that way about Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4 Dream Master. I know that for most people, Part 3 Dream Warriors is the holy grail. I understand that completely. Let me just say right up front, this is no knock on Dream Warriors. I think Dream Warriors probably is the best written sequel in the franchise, the best written movie in the franchise, outside of Wes Craven's New Nightmare. Has maybe the best special effects, the best budget, the best acting. I mean, Dream Warriors, if that's one of your best horror films of all time, then you're certainly not in the wrong on thinking that. But I have an extremely soft spot for Dream Master, and I'm going to talk about that film in depth today because I don't know, on rewatches, I always get more and more enjoyment out of watching Dream Master, and it reminds me so much of how I feel about Halloween 4, where it's like, okay, it's the fourth entry. They're introducing new characters. They're going in a different direction. They have to sort of move on from Nancy. You can no longer rely on Nancy in the franchise because Headley Camp was killed off at the end of Part 3. So you're doing something different, new characters. And like Halloween 4, by the time Nightmare 4 comes, it's like, okay, in Halloween 4, they know Michael Myers is the franchise. He has to come back. He has to be the one. And Part 4 of Nightmare is really highlighting the idea that, look, Freddy is the franchise. I mean, they kind of knew that with Part 3, but this really starts to lean into Freddy as the franchise. And that means more funny Freddy, which some people hate, but I have no qualms about saying I'm a huge fan of funny Freddy. I grew up with funny Freddy. I think of Freddy as a funny slasher villain. So the good thing about Part 4 is that even though Freddy's going to lean funny, if you don't like super over-the-top Freddy, he's still a little bit lesser of that here than he is in Part 5, and especially lesser here than that in Part 6. Part 6, I mean, obviously he goes full-blown Bugs Bunny Looney Tunes character. He's not quite that in Part 4. He still has some menacingness to him in Part 4. He still has some scary things, and some of the death scenes here are pretty dark when you actually break it down. But, okay. Dream Warriors was a big success, so we came back with Dream Master very quickly. Renny Harlin's directing here. Renny Harlin would go on to make, Die Hard 2, Cliffhanger, Deep Blue Sea. So he's a great action director and a great visual director. So you kind of know the movie's in good hands with Renny Harlin directing. And, Robert Englund is back, of course, and Dream Master would actually be the biggest grossing horror sequel, the biggest grossing slasher movie of the 1980s, believe it or not. Think about all the Halloween movies that came out in the 80s, all the Friday the 13th films that came out, the Texas Chainsaw Massacres. Think about all the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. They all are not at number one on the list on the top slasher film of the 80s. It is Dream Master. And this is peak Freddy. This is Freddy, again, with 1-800 hotlines. This is Freddy in, music videos. This is Freddy. They're getting ready to do the Freddy's Nightmares TV show. Freddy's all over the place there. And in mainstream pop culture, Freddy peaked higher than both Jason and Michael. Freddy here in 1988, 1987, 1989, that 3-year period, at no point was Michael Myers or Jason Voorhees ever bigger in pop culture, in the cultural zeitgeist, than Freddy was here. And that's why I always say people, rightfully so. Maybe Jason and Michael now historically have had more longevity than Freddy. Longevity in terms of like movies spanning all the decades and the box office of Halloween 2018 really cementing Michael as maybe number one. But I mean, it's gonna sound cliche, pun intended here, but no franchise burned brighter for a shorter period of time than Nightmare on Elm Street. When Nightmare on Elm Street was on peak, you can look at the box office, you can look at the impact on pop culture, how big Freddy was. It was just flat out bigger than the Friday the 13th franchise or the Halloween franchise, and Freddy himself was a bigger icon than any version of Jason and any version of Michael Myers. This is truth speaking to you. I say it as a big Halloween fan, a big Friday the 13th fan. Freddy Krueger peaked higher than both other horror slasher icons. So that's the table for Dream Master. And what are we doing here with Dream Master? Well, we're going to bring back the Dream Warriors and we're going to kill them off in the first 20 minutes. Now, was this a good idea? Listen, I interviewed Ken Sagos on the channel. I asked him about it. He said it was purely just business. Of course, he loved the character Kincaid, but it wasn't his. He didn't write the script, so he was going to do whatever was in the script. And the script called for Kincaid to die, for Joey to die, for Kristen to die. I would have rather them not killed off the Dream Warriors. I mean, of course, I would like the movie just to start off. You're moving on to new characters, just start off with new characters. But I mean, at least compared to say Friday the 13th and Halloween, give them some credit. They're trying to make an overarching story. So they're like, okay, well, Freddy wouldn't just start with a new group of teens. He would want to go back and take out the Dream Warriors. So it's like we can't really move on with the franchise if these 3 Dream Warriors are still here. So you're faced with the task of, okay, we bring back the Dream Warriors. Do we let them survive? I mean, you can, but if you make a reliance on the Dream Warriors like they have to survive, then for a slasher film, you're killing off any stakes. Like if they kept coming back and okay, Kincaid's safe, Kristen's safe because they are the Dream Warriors, it would cause some issues with doing more and more sequels. So for a fresh start, for a brand new thing, it does make sense to move on cleanly from the Dream Warriors. And instead of doing some BS, they move to a different town or something like that, I guess it makes sense just to confront it head on and just kill them off in the first 20 minutes. I hate to see it because we love Kincaid. Well, I don't really care about Joey. And then with Kristen, they have a new actress Tuesday night replacing Patricia Arquette. So the impact of her death is a little bit less just because it's a different actress playing her. So you don't feel that same emotional connection. But Kincaid's death, I feel all the emotional connection to Kincaid. So when he dies, I'm like, damn it, man. Why'd you have to take out Kincaid? Bringing Freddy back by a dog pissing on his bones. I mean, this is one of the stupidest resurrections for Freddy. There's no question about that. I mean, but like Freddy himself says, you shouldn't have buried me. He wasn't dead. I do think Kincaid gets a great death scene. He drops the car on Freddy. He celebrates a little bit too early. Freddy comes back. Freddy seems to have some kind of respect for Kincaid, in my opinion. When he kills him, it's a very quick, almost painless, just stabs him, holds him, and says, tell him Freddy sent you. But it doesn't seem like a torturous type of death. I feel like Freddy has some kind of respect for Kincaid here. What the hell happens to Joey? Joey gets pulled into a waterbed, and then when his mom comes and finds him, he's in the waterbed. He's in the bed. How did he get in the waterbed? After we watch that, see was the bed sealed off, or is he actually just like he's in the waterbed but it's still closed off? I don't know. I never really care about Joey, so I wasn't sad to see him go. And then Kristen. Great death scene when the beach thing is hilarious. Freddy on the beach with the sunglasses, pushing her head back down in the sand with his feet, which is itself a perfect death scene. But then she's gonna bring Alice into the dream because Freddy killing off the Dream Warriors still needs somebody to be able to bring people to him to kill. He needs Kristen to pass the powers on to Alice, which voluntarily or involuntarily she does pass the powers on to Alice. And now Alice can bring new teens into the dreams, which Freddy can kill. So that's our setup here. Moving on from the Dream Warriors to a new cast of characters, which is Alice's friend group, which is basically Alice, her brother Rick, her would-be boyfriend Dan, Elaine, the weightlifting girl, Sheila, I think, is the brainiac person here. So I have a new group of teens that Freddy can stalk and kill. A couple things stand out about the film to me. Again, visually, it looks fantastic. It looks amazing. Rennie Harlan gets a cinematography like watching it in 4K. I got the 4K box set. The movie looks like it could have been released in the last 10 years. It looks that good for an 80s film. So visually, it looks fantastic. The music, man, the music is so good. From the opening tip, the movie opens with Tuesday Night's song Nightmare playing. It's such a good song. Like, go on YouTube right now, listen to Tuesday Night's Nightmare. It's a fantastic song. I mean, look, she's a pretty good actress. She's a great singer, in my opinion. Dramarama anything playing during the nunchuck sequence as Alice starts to inherit the powers of her friends. Now she can do the nunchucks. Now she's a brainiac. I mean, to be fair, you can't beat Dawkins though in Nightmare 3, the Dream Warrior song, but this soundtrack is very close. So it looks great, it sounds great. In terms of the acting, Lisa Wilcox has big shoes to fill there. She has to take over basically the Nancy role, which you would think was going to Alice, or you think that was going to Kristen, but Kristen being killed off in the first 20 minutes. In hindsight, it does feel more like we transitioned from Nancy in part 3 to now Alice in part 4. I have Kristen on my final girls list, but to me, the final girls, the main final people in the franchise are basically Nancy and Alice. And Alice, in the first half of this film, the way the character's written, she's supposed to be very shy and very to herself and kind of in a shell. And then slowly, as she inherits her friend's powers, as she starts to rev up for her fight with Freddy, she does get more confident, and the acting seems to get better. Like Alice in the second half of the film is way better acting wise than her in the first half. In the first half, Lisa Wilcox has a line delivery that feels like they dubbed over her voice. So her voice and line delivery sounds very odd and off in the first half. But the second half, she is on point. I would say from the second half of Nightmare 4 through Nightmare 5, I think Alice is one of the best final girls in the history of horror films. I think she's right below Nancy in the franchise, and maybe she might be the damn. I mean, Freddy never defeats Alice. Freddy did get the best of Nancy, but he never got the best of Alice here. So, But all right, death scenes wise, I mean, Sheila's death scene, the kiss of death from Freddy, as Freddy picks a damn apple apart with his finger knives. That's great. Rick's death scene. Rick's Alice's brother, and I think that Rick is a likable character, and in rewatches, it always strikes me that they made the wrong move in having Dan and Alice are kind of our final couple that survives. But I think this movie would have been better if it was actually Alice and Rick as a brother-sister combo being the survivors. Because once you transition to their story, it feels like the crux of the story, the emotional core of the story, is the family relationship of Alice, her father, and her brother Rick. That feels like the core of the film to me, and Dan sort of gets shoehorned in as like some guy that is sort of part of the friendship group because he's friends with Rick, but then that starts like a romance with Alice that I don't think is actually needed here. But I would have much preferred Rick to survive over Dan. He's a strong supporting character. Look, his death scene is kind of goofy and funny. I mean, it's Kung Fu Freddy. Robert Englund's not even in there in the damn room. It's just Invisible Freddy giving fun Kung Fu-like one-liners. And this is just like, I guess they ran out of budget or something here because they they thought the scene was bad enough that they just basically sat there and said, hey, why don't we junk this death scene and just let Rick survive? That was a discussion of like, should we just let Rick survive? And then the only reason they didn't have him survive apparently is because they remembered they had already went to the trouble of filming that funeral scene. They filmed this funeral scene where he comes out the casket and all the people are there. And they were like, man, we're wasting a lot then if we junk the death scene and then also, take out that funeral scene. That's a lot of wasted film footage versus us just using the death scene and using the funeral scene. So there's a universe where Rick could have survived. It just, they had already filmed that funeral scene, which doomed him. But I think he's a strong character, and I think that you're sad to see him go once he dies. And that's what Nightmare 4 does have. The characters are all likable enough that when the death scenes happen, you like all the characters. You like Sheila. You like Elaine. You like Rick. You like all the Dream Warriors, of course. The ending, man. I love this ending. This whole church sequence with Alice versus Freddy. It. I said it time and time again. Like this version of Freddy, it's like the perfect mix. Like I mean, you could say Dream Warriors perfect mix too, but you're getting Freddy's one-liners, but he's still menacing. He's still trying to be scary. And part 5 and 6, he let go of any idea of trying to be intimidating or scary. But when she's kicking his ass and he just keeps coming back and laughing, that's actually pretty scary. Freddy's death scene here is so good. Forget about the whole holding the mirror up and The dream rhyme just makes him lose his mind, seeing his image in the mirror, lose his mind. You can take that or leave that if you feel like that's a good end for Freddy. But what happens to him when he backs up and then the damn souls in his stomach start to come alive and start to eat him from inside out and take over? That is like poetic justice for Freddy, for the souls he's trapped and enslaved inside of him to come back and take him out. That's a perfect ending for Freddy. Much more definitive perfect ending than we've seen in most of the Nightmare films. Most Nightmare films have a death for Freddy that's kind of like feels like a temporary escape from Freddy versus a definitive death. This feels like a definitive death. If they stopped making movies after part 4, we would look back and say, okay, that was a proper end to Freddy Krueger. Not only does he die, the souls escape and they go right by Alice and they kind of are happy and thankful and joyous that they're being released. And I can't believe I'm going to use this word for a Nightmare on Elm Street film, but it's kind of a touching ending. Seeing the souls happily go into the sky and Alice watching them and knowing that those souls are at peace. It's damn near beautiful and touching. I mean, it kind of hits you in the feels when you see that. I mean, you're thinking about all the victims from Nightmare 4 and the previous films. They all got released. All their souls are at peace now. It's a perfect ending. Unfortunately, everybody who died in part 5 and on probably are shit out of luck, though, because there's no point in the future films where I guess the souls get released. But again, this ending with all the souls being released, it's a proper ending to the franchise. I know that it made so much money they came back immediately next year with part 5. And listen, I'm happy we got part 5. I'm happy we got Freddy's dead. But if it was strictly just Dream Master as the end of the original series, and then eventually you have Wes Craven's New Nightmare, and then again Freddy's dead, I'm okay with that also. Like I said, this is a nice definitive ending. If you want to pretend this is the end of Freddy, you're not doing such a bad job here. So I love the ending. I love Alice as a final girl. I think this is one of the best interpretations of Freddy. I like all the characters, the death scenes, the music's on point, and I assure you this movie has a strong rewatchability. This movie has a rewatchability that is on par with any of the other films in the franchise. Now, for the $1,000,000 question, do I think it's better than Dream Warriors? No. On a technical level, it's not better made than Dream Warriors. It doesn't have better characters. I understand Dream Warriors are everybody's favorite. I would just say that Dream Master should be in consideration for your favorite movie in the franchise or the best movie in the franchise. It should be in consideration. Rewatchability, peak Freddy fame, the biggest, highest grossing slasher film of the 80s. Maybe the most underrated sequel in the franchise actually is Freddy's Dead. I'll probably maybe more champion that in the future. But I think Dream Master's in my top 3, and for me, it's in consideration for best in the franchise. And controversially, I do like it better than the first Nightmare on Elm Street. I don't think I like it better than Dream Warriors, but I actually have it ranked above the original Nightmare on Elm Street, which is wild, I know. All right, in the comments, let me know your thoughts on Dream Master. Where do you rank in the franchise? What do you think about it? What would you improve? What do you like about it? And of course, again, please subscribe to the channel if you've not. We have plenty more Freddy content coming up in the next few weeks. Until then, you guys take care.